Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.
Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand, here with Carl Forehand, and we have a returning guest tonight, Becky Garrison. I'm so excited to get into this conversation because she has a new book coming out, and she's actually a friend of the podcast. She's been on a couple times, once by herself and once with Brad. I don't know his last name, but
Sargent.
Okay, perfect. Talking about the Tim Whitaker stuff that was going on about a year ago. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, she has a couple of books. One's called Distilled in Washington, and another one's called Jesus Died for This?
Yeah,
Question mark. And now has a book called Gaslighting for God. We're real happy to have her on here because I'll tell you why. I personally am glad you're on here because she's one of my friends, and we talk behind the scenes a lot about what's going on and what we could do, maybe or not do about that situation. And so that I appreciate that. All of us that are involved in that don't always have a lot of time to talk about it, but we kind of make each other aware of things that are going on and whether or not we're going to get involved or not. Because I think kind of in the desert, in the deconstruction world, we're all kind of not, it's just that we've got to be kind of vigilant about not letting this turn into something like what we already had and what we came out of. And so there, most people want to slow it down a little bit and let's do it right. And let's, and then we see the mistakes and we wonder, what can I do? How can I be an ally, or how can I be an advocate? And so all those questions come up when you're talking to Becky. But she's also one of my intelligent friends, that a great writer, and loved her last. I love Distilled in Washington, even though I'm not necessarily a whiskey drinker or anything like that, but it was really good. And I enjoyed reading, enjoyed the story and the history and all those things. So welcome to the podcast, Becky.
Thank you.
We're not going to have you. We're not going to have you tell your story as much, but just kind of introduce yourself. These are the highlights of where I come from, what I'm doing, and we'll go from there.
Well, ever since I sold my first article to the Wittenberg Door, which that was back in 1994, you might say I've kind of been holding the church accountable through the vehicle of satire for over 30 years now. I bring to this an experience. I have an MDiv MSW. I'm not a practicing clinician. I need to make it very perfectly clear. So my goal is to be as an educator, to guide people by highlighting places where people are in positions of power. That's the role of a satirist. We serve as the court jester to keep the king honest. But then we also, the added feature that I like to do is I like to look, where do I see the glimpses of the God or the divine or something beyond ourselves? Because once you break down someone's idol and you smash it, what are the glimpses that start coming through of something authentic? Once you get rid of the false self, what comes back? What is available? What is possible? So that way I'm kind of more of an optimist. I know people say, oh, you're always criticizing, No, a satirist's goal is to get people to find a place where they can just truly be whoever they are.
Another
That's
friend
different for all of us.
another friend of ours, Stuart Deloney, wrote a piece about the fool, the archetype of the fool, and how they keep the king accountable and by making them laugh. And he kind of made the point that now that the fool is on the throne, then people sometimes don't know how to take satire anymore. Is that true or not? I mean, they believe it. They kind of either flatly deny everything or flatly accept everything, and it's kind of hard to get through, right?
Oh, well, my observation is that one, I had my first revelation about this during the Clinton administration, where I tried to write something more ridiculous than what was actually transpiring during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And I couldn't. That was my first, example. Then during the Bush administration, can I write anything funnier than, what was going on, like staging a false war on the premise of following 9/11? No, I can't. So sometimes as a satirist, you're finding I can't be anything funnier. And I definitely cannot write anything more funny and more satirical than what's happening here. My point is that I think a lot of us following, 4 years of COVID and a lot of global isolation, a lot of polarization, we have to admit that we as a world have global PTSD. And in that situation, people are often trauma bonded to whoever will give them hope, whoever will give them something to help alleviate the pain. And we have leaders who are fully willing to take advantage of people in this current situation. It looks more egregious on the right because the right is more exhibitionist. They're more overt. They're more obnoxious in your face. But some of the progressive stuff is just equally as damning. It's kind of like, do you starve someone all at once by refusing them food, or you give them just enough morsels that they're not going to starve, but they're not getting healthy? My goal is to help people try to achieve healthiness. A lot of this is dismantling our leaders. We have to. Margaret Wheatley, who I quote in the book, it's a very good book, Who Do We Choose to Be? She says we're in the age of decadence, pointing out we're in various civilization cycles. And now that I know this, how do I respond when we're in this current situation where everything looks artificial, everything looks unreal? We're distinguishing between reality and AI. And into this thing, anybody can send us a lot of messages, and people want to believe it. They want to believe these memes, whether they're true or not. They just need to feel the need to believe something so they can stay grounded. And my hope is to get people to stop looking at other people. It's like Mary Williamson says, we are the change you've been waiting for. So what does that mean? What can we do at the grassroots level? Because right now I feel like there's nothing I can do at the national political level until Citizens United is overturned. I don't feel that I have control at that level. I cannot tell the institutional church to do anything. They're not going to listen to me. I can't tell people not to pursue the path of best-selling Christian celebrity because the temptation of that to cash in for Christ or chakras is just intense. It's really very enticing. But what I can do is say, what happens when you try to seek out something authentic? And that at the grassroots is making a connection, people to people. It's not sexy. But to me, it's very spiritual. And that's where the real hope. And when I see signs of that starting to happen, that gives me hope.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not totally despondent right now, even though we're in a state that we could basically say is about as crazy as I can recall any point in my youth growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So many times I think about, that bully on the playground, the kid, and the current guy reminds me of the little bully guy on the playground, and how you look at him and look at how hopeless he seems inside, and that's why he has to do that. But now that little kid has come to power. He's in power. He's and people have said, well, who else am I going to follow? So they'll follow him. But you have two words on the screen right now in your T-shirt that you're wearing and the book behind you. That's your new book. And those two words are narcissist and gaslighting. Explain how narcissism works, and do people understand that?
Well, I think it's one of those words like believer, salvation that just gets completely misused and misunderstood. People often assume that you're a narcissist means you're self-centered, you're egotistical. Now, that can be a range of us. I mean, if I'm right in the middle of a creative writing project, I am totally self-absorbed and totally focused on that. And I will tell people, please interrupt me if something serious happens. If I've had a current problem in my life where all of a sudden there's just I'm under so much stress, I'm not going to be able to extend empathy and compassion to other people because I'm so into myself. And sometimes that happens. You just need to be in a mode of self-survival. And a lot of us are in that. We're also encouraged to show off on social media. We are encouraged to be these, strut your stuff, be a boss girl, whatever the current moniker is.
Mm-hmm.
Boss girl just happens to be one that I find to be totally just obnoxious. I don't know what the hell it means. But,
Yeah.
I think the difference is that when someone is a narcissist, it is someone who cannot display empathy or compassion towards you. And they also have a very grandiose sense of self. The entire conversation ultimately around them and their needs. They're incapable or they do not wish to put themselves into another person's shoes. They cannot or will not see what another person is going through. And as I said, a lot of times it can be misconstrued. Like if someone is undergoing a very stressful situation, or like me, they're a creative dreamer in the clouds, they can give off the impression that they're not caring, but it could be something else. But it's noticing a particular pattern that my needs never matter. I am as good to someone as long as I'm of service to them. And how this takes out in the spiritual world, which is the focus I am because I'm a religious satirist, is they put their own needs ahead of other people, and they're basically dangling salvation in front of you. If you want to enter the kingdom, whatever the kingdom is, whether it's whatever the viewpoint is, for you to achieve this as an enlightened being on the extreme liberal side, for you to be a proper Christian, for you to follow these things, you must subscribe to this rule book. And it can be very overt, as in the case of a fundamentalist. I believe it, Jesus said it, that does it.
Yeah.
Or it can be much more enlightened. If you only believe what we believe, you are truly enlightened, you would have that ability to comprehend what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up feeling kind of icky. You exit. I encourage people to start tuning into yourself. How do you feel? So it's not so much. Maybe you can enjoy this person in small doses. I want to make that very clear. I think I can go to a comedy concert or a music event or whatever with someone that is known off stage to be a complete narcissist and have an enjoyable evening. I can enjoy that person's performance for what it is. The problem is when you expect that person to be the leader of a movement, the leader of a community, the leader where you're forming connections. That isn't going to happen. Like you go to this latest, greatest conference, you're not going to leave there with your best friends who are now going to be forming a new heaven here on earth. You're going to go there and have an okay time, do a very good time, listening to some interesting talks. Mm-hmm. But too often it gets marketed as this is the only way to be. This is the way to follow me. You must buy my books. You must participate in this. And if you don't do all of these things, then you're not going to be part of the cool kid club. Mm-hmm. And people are starting to realize this is a complete load of crap. All of a sudden, it's also the nanosecond you disagree with someone. Like if I told you, for example, Carl, I couldn't be on your podcast tonight, something came up. You might be disappointed. You might be a little ticked at me, especially if you had to change your plans to accommodate me. Yeah. But you wouldn't all of a sudden just lash out at me like I was this horrible human being.
Yeah, you're doing that to try to hurt me.
A narcissist would. You went against me. You wounded me. And all of a sudden you notice that when you say it, and I tell people one way to tell if someone's a narcissist or not, try gently saying no. Just say, I can't do that today, but I can do it tomorrow. I mean, I'm not saying, blow them off completely, but just try. And when you'll notice that with a narcissist, it's you're in or you're out. Mm-hmm. Are you in? Are you not in? I mean, obviously, as writers, we'd love to have people buy our books. We'd love to have people engage with what we're doing. But we don't value people on the basis of whether or not they wish to engage with our work. That doesn't determine their worth. They have worth intrinsic, regardless. They can say my work sucks. They still have value as a human being.
Greg Locke said, even when I'm wrong, I'm right. Because I'm your pastor, and you need to follow everything I say. You said no empathy and no compassion. And that no empathy thing has kind of got some traction in certain circles, right? That we shouldn't have empathy. But from my understanding, empathy is it's the cure for a lot of things. That to have empathy, number one, it cures shame, right? Or at least that it's the cure for shame is to put yourself in someone and say, me too, or my church experience too, SA experience too. All that stuff needs empathy. And in early parts of deconstruction, compassion uh, for myself and compassion um, for other people turned out to be one of the most important things to healing and to changing things around. So, but the narcissist doesn't even consider that and considers that weakness, right? Is that right?
I would say that they consider, yeah, that for the most part, they would consider, but in the case of a communal narcissist or a victim narcissist, there's an overt form and a more covert form. And the more covert narcissist may agree with you. This is the part that really gets me in. A communal narcissist will agree with you. Yes, you've been suffering. They will pull on your heartstrings. You know, a victim narcissist is someone who will claim, I've been persecuted just like you. You know, I've been, so they will pull you in with their story and you become very sympathetic. And then all of a sudden you realize this person doesn't care about you. They're using their victimhood to gain sympathy points, to solicit money, to and get everyone to do as they wish. I mean, you look over the victim narcissist, you see them in a church setting, everyone is gathered around to help this person. And this person never seems to get better. It's a never ending stream of GoFundMe campaigns. There never seems to be an attempt. Like if you say, can you help me with this? No. Because all of a sudden they need for them to be the sympathetic person. And then you have the communal narcissist, which is like, let's all create a heaven here on earth. But the heaven they're looking to create here on earth requires them to be the DJ who's kind of doing the leading. We're going to create the community based on my books. We're going to create the community based on what I'm going to contribute. So you get the illusion that you're helping to build a community. I see this a lot in progressive circles where people just leave a progressive setting totally disillusioned because they realize I was just a lackey. I was just someone who was there to serve. And the moment I said I was sick or the moment I said I needed something, no one was there for me. So I think it extends beyond just, you know, sometimes people can fake empathy and compassion, especially there's not a whole lot of pastors who are exhibitionists. They're trained not to be a show off. So a lot of times there'd be that subtle pastor thing going on, you know, where it's not the bombastic type Tony Robbins, extraneous, you know, Mark Driscoll, Stronger Man Conference type of a pastor, or the liberal equivalent of, you know, these female badasseries.
Yeah.
But it could be something much more subtle, like let's all come together and sing Kumbaya and we'll collect our navel. Let's take up a collection for my next project, kind of giving you the illusion, or if they give you anything they do, there are strings attached. And that's one reason why I wanted to write this guidebook, because I think what you're talking about, the first step are the survivor stories. We need to know this isn't just an isolated incident. You brought up the book Nobody's Girl. It's important to know that it wasn't just one person that was trafficked by Epstein. It wasn't just one person that this particular pastor. When I say abuses within, like, let's say the emergent church network, I emphasize the word plural. Too often you want to reduce it to, well, this is the one bad apple. We got rid of the bad apple. Now we have this completely healthy situation. All you did was rearrange the chairs on the Titanic. You didn't really solve the root problem down in the engine. And a lot of it is that I think the institutional church, you could argue that ever since Constantine took it over, we've had this battle between the saints, the true saints who wanted to really follow God, and the institutional church that wanted something done a certain way. So this is a battle we've been having for quite some time. We're just now hitting a tipping point in the United States where the largest growing group of people in religion are nuns. And this is completely freaking out a lot of the people within institutional churches. They keep saying, if we build a better church, they will come. They're not coming. They're selling you snake oil, basically. All these books that the different publishers are coming out, they're saying, here's a new type of Christianity. Here's this new, you're just taking stuff and just regurgitating it. You're not actually changing the root core, which is how do you help people define their own individual spiritual journeys? That isn't the goal of the institutional church. The goal of the institutional church is to stay alive. Right now, I would argue that a lot of the institutional church is just kept alive by endowments. It's kept alive by it's basically the fat lady singing. It just is. It's dead, but it looks like it's still alive because there's still some endowment money left. There's still some political clout. We're just now at the point where you can be an atheist and get elected in certain areas to get office. I mean, that is a huge new development. It started with Barney Frank was the first. I think he was the first openly gay member of Congress, but it's now at the point where things are starting to shift, and the institution is not happy with this. Obviously, they're going to lose a lot of money when everybody has their own ability to think for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and an organization, has to look out for the organization first. Then it usually has a narcissist that's the second thing, or maybe that's the first thing. Look out for his or her interests and support them and buy their books, like you said. But when I keep saying, that or thinking someday it's just all going to crumble, like you're talking about. It's so everything seems so weak right now, and to be honest, I don't care that much, except that I would like to see people be good people and move forward. And I think maybe in small groups you could do that, but it seems like every organization, whether it's a church or a business or a community club or whatever, once it gets established enough, we're dealing with that with the volunteer organization we're working with right now, where they've gotten big. And since they've gotten big, they can't respond. They can't get the right people to speak and everything because they have commitments and they got to keep the trains running and they got to get the biggest star to come in and all those things to keep the organization running. And we kind of forget the main purpose or the main thing, right? So let's talk about your book a little bit. And Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm good.
You got a question or?
I had one, but I lost it because I'm listening. No, I'm listening to your conversation. If I think of it, I'll ask it.
Yeah, you will. That's right. So, how did you start writing Gaslighting for God? And this is your new work coming out soon.
Yeah, it's coming out January 27th, 2026. The reason I wrote it is, as I mentioned in the beginning, to me, survivor stories are the first step of healing, to realize you're not alone. The second step to me are books on religious trauma. How do you heal from this? Because here you have to take the example of the woman who's what they give you when you fly on the plane. Put your mask on before you help anyone else. So I see too many instances of what I would call the unhealed, the wounded unhealers instead of the wounded healer. Because if someone, and I was guilty of this for a while before the research into trauma came, I realized that in my quest to want to help people, it's like, I want you to be whole. I want you to do this. But I was operating from a place of trauma. I was still being triggered by my trauma triggers. And I thought, because I'd done all this work on alcoholism, my family's alcoholism, that, oh yeah, I've got this under control. But I was then wondering, why am I being triggered when I'm around certain energies that are come across similar to alcoholic energies, very self-centered, not caring about me, totally self-absorbed. Why am I being triggered? These people aren't drinking. And then I began to realize that there was narcissism inherent in my family tree. Coupled with, it was masked because they were alcoholics as well. And I just started thinking, and I began to look at reflecting on all the work I'd done for the door. And it was like, wow, now I'm starting to understand why a lot of people, when you critique them, someone who's healthy would go, oh, you're an asshole. Or they might say something like that. They might say, how could you say that about me? I thought we were friends. They might get PO'd at you. But then others like Jerry Jenkins, I mean, we had so much fun with the Left Behind stuff with the door. I mean, everything under the sun. And he agreed to an interview. He thought it was funny. He got it. He understood that as a satirist, we make fun of you. That means you made it. That means you made a stand on the national stage, and the satirists are going to come for you, just like they do for every politician, every public figure. It's our job to keep those in the public eye accountable. And I rely on people like y'all to remind me when my stuff starts to stink. Please tell you want people to know. I tell everybody you must surround yourself with people that tell you when you're about to act like a jerk, because it is so. I mean, just the mere concept of talking about your book sounds kind of narcissistic in a way. I mean, you're sitting here talking about yourself. Well, to help people ground you, that you're trying to help people to educate them about this. So that was the second piece, was looking for ways to heal yourself. There's some interesting books coming out about trauma. I think similar to anything in the mindfulness movement with there's a lot of crap coming down the pipe too. A lot of people are trying to capitalize in. There's narc talk. There's stuff on Instagram. There's a lot of people that are not qualified to offer mental health treatment. There's people that have mental health treatment that think they're trauma informed and they really hurt other people. So it's becoming, I think over time, this is such a new field. People are still feeling it out. I think over time we will develop a set of best practices and learn who can we trust, who can we not trust, who's giving out the good certifications, who's giving out garbage. But I wasn't seeing what I call a prevention manual, which is how do you keep yourself, because what often happens, it happened to me, you leave one spiritual setting for what looks like a better setting, and you realize there's narcissistic energies in here. This might look different. This might be a Buddhist temple instead of a Christian church. Or this might be a lovely, peaceful tantra group where you can explore your sexuality and your spirituality. Or this setting could look completely unlike what you would think is a traditional church service, but it's still led by someone who is a spiritual narcissist. Mm-hmm. So for me, the goal with this book was, how do you spot the patterns? Because once you see those patterns, you can tell yourself, okay, I'm in a site that's full of narcissistic energy. How do I respond? Do I run for the hills? Maybe I don't. Maybe this is a setting where, this is part of a neighborhood group. I want to stay somewhat connected. So how do I disengage if I don't feel like I can walk away? Or maybe I want to just enjoy the event. How do I manage this energy so I can downplay my expectations? Say, hey, that was a fun night. Not to think this is the start of a new coexisting way of being, and this is a new horizon, New Jerusalem, whatever the heck they want to call this. Mm-hmm. Just to realize when you're being hoodwinked, when you're being fooled. And then armed with that awareness, you can decide much better, is this a situation I want to be in at all? And if so, just distance yourself. These are casual friends. These are casual acquaintances. These are not going to become your best buds. And hopefully, and I find that the more I can operate and take this, the better my life is.
I think I've heard myself in there somewhere. That I am a person that tends to, has always been looking to understand people and to figure out how we can move forward and how we can heal. And I had so many things wrong with me that I couldn't explain and so on, that you do have a tendency to do that, though. You pick up something new, it sounds good, it sounds fresh, and it resonates with you. And then you say, well, this is my new thing. This is what I'm going to do. And pour everything into it and go crazy. And I don't want to use that crazy word wrong, but you know what I mean. Just you get excited and this is my new deal, right? And then you've watched, the traditional church, the emergent church, the progressive movement, deconstruction movement, and you've kind of watched all that closely now. So I really don't have a question there. So it's just that sometimes I'm guilty, and I assume I must be somewhat narcissistic to think that I could just take a couple of courses and lead a movement. And I'm always not sure whether I want to do that anyhow, since I'm a little shy. So anyway.
I think there's I feel like when you do that, it comes from a good place. And I feel like, Becky, you were just talking about that. You want to help people. Mm-hmm. And I guess you just have to be self-aware of when, it becomes more about you and people listening to you and people doing what you want them to do,
and especially
as opposed to, helping. And helping people heal.
Especially when people can't, like she said, when people can't question you,
Right.
or anything they do hits you personally, a lot harder than it should, maybe. So,
And we started hitting a lot harder than hoods. I mean, one of the mistakes that I made was I had a few because I had had my prior traumas. I think for a lot of people, if you grew up with a family that wasn't the most healthy family on the planet, and my family definitely, I would say my entire family, except for a few members, I can count on one hand the number of family members that are not alcoholics and narcissists in my extended family on both sides. And I think we're susceptible to those kind of, we're susceptible to the BS. So I think this is kind of giving yourself, almost like I described it as a counter-religious raid. Like once you understand these patterns, you know how to, I can know how to deal with it. And when someone says to me, I make a comment and someone says, "Oh, you're being mean to me," I just go, "Oh, sorry." I don't like. I usually go, "Oh my God, I was mean to this writer." I said, "No, the person is trying to gaslight me because they don't like what I said." Instead of saying, I remember this one comment, for example. I got one too many press releases of all these hipster rappers were talking about their tattoos, and they say so and so his gang tattoo is now forgotten, all this kind of stuff. And I remember doing this post about, hey, listen, guys, people in the real tattoo culture don't mention their tattoos in their bios; they just do them. And I got some feedback from some tattooed pastors of, "You're mean, you're nasty, you're horrible." No, all I was saying is that from what I know from people in the tattooed community, they were telling me we don't talk about our tattoos.
yeah.
We don't advertise ourselves as a tattooed biker. We're
don't use it to sell tickets,
no,
right?
they don't. It's part of their community. It's part of their art, and that's just a mild example. That's an example where that used to just drive me crazy. Oh no, someone thought I was mean. Oh, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to make this better? I need to get back on this person's good side because they're somebody who might help me get a speaking gig, or they might help me with something. I need to rectify this. Now I'm like, nah, next. Just, and once you get to that point where you don't get, sometimes I do get agitated, but I don't find myself getting triggered. Or if I'm triggered, it goes away within a day. There are days when you'll have one of those days, like one too many things will happen, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh my God!" Oh, you just have I'm not saying you're going to become an automatic robot or something, but it's more a question of, okay, fine, I'm out of here now. I get it, because we are led by a lot of our politicians. I mean, I'm just looking at, watching the Democrats' response to this crisis. I'm not seeing a lot of Democrats rising up and raising all holy hell about the fact that a lot of Americans did not get to eat last week. That they lost their money. This should have been, people should have been going mama bear on us. I mean, a non-narcissist would go completely, mama bear on us and just say, this is just totally unacceptable. You do not do this under any circumstances. Where was the outrage? So there's this performative outrage. It's outrage when it works for your cause, but like I've decided for the next 2 election cycles, I'm looking at 2 issues. One is, how do people respond to the Epstein files, and how do people respond to the SNAP decisions? And as of right now, there's very few members of Congress that would have my support, because most of them have not acted like they're concerned about it because they want to embarrass Trump, not because they want to get justice for the victims.
That's interesting in that a narcissistic tendency could be, like you're explaining it very well, could be to not say anything to preserve my position and my followers and my power. Doesn't have to be me being mean or excluding someone or whatever. It's just, well, my position, where I'm at, I'm going to protect that. Maybe it's quietly. I just don't say anything, because my position matters more, right?
And it's also, I remember this to give you another this is a minor example. I was talking with a woman who, she prides herself as being a progressive, best-selling author type dealy. And I was discussing with her back in 2008 or 9 how excited I was that webinars were starting to develop. I said, this is great. We can now have inexpensive teaching options. So people don't have to spend, $1,000, $1,500, even more to attend a conference. They can just plug into a webinar for, nickels on the dime, so to speak. And she was like very upset about this, because if this went through, if we started switching from webinars to in-person speaking, she was going to lose all of her frequent flyer bonuses, and she couldn't book first class tickets anymore.
Yeah.
And that is, and I'm not joking, and this is somebody who claims to be a progressive, goes on the anti-Trump bandwagon, and yet I'm not joking. I mean, there's been so many instances, and I point a number of them throughout my book, where people, you ask someone a question, why did you take this money from this conservative person who is anti-gay, and then you're marketing yourself as pro-gay? Mm-hmm. They'll just say to them, so who paid you to ruin my ministry? Who paid you to come in here and say these horrible things? Right. I didn't say horrible things. I'm just asking you how you can be a best-selling author and, promote yourself as this progressive gay icon when you took money from some very conservative sources. Just explain that. And I think that's a legitimate question to ask, because I always tell people, follow the money, and that's how you see what someone really worships. So a lot of the unpacking of a narcissist is they may present this image, but who's funding this? Look to see who's funding it. That'll tell you what they really believe. And if they will not release their documents, which, like was a major problem with Mark Driscoll, we couldn't get the finances from him. So if you see people who are acting that way, I think it's very important to kind of just in your own way, look at them and say, follow the money. And that's a very good way to tell if someone is actually walking the walk, or if they're just all about themselves.
Yeah. So let's talk about gaslighting for a minute. In case someone doesn't know what gaslighting is, maybe let's explain that a little bit and talk specifically about how the book's going to help you with that. Gaslighting, I understand gaslighting to have originated kind of back when we had simpler kinds of theater and so on, and this may just be one example of how you explain it, but they'd have the container of liquid and the light shining through it, and they wrestle it around, they move it around, and it's when the bad character's coming in, or where it's just to shed a bad light on people.
Yeah, well, actually, it originated with this movie called Gaslighting, where the husband was manipulating the lights and kept telling the wife, no.
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with this. It's all about in your head. And a good example of gaslighting from my childhood would be, why is grandma lying there drunk? No, grandma's not drunk. She's sleeping. She's taking a nap. You see something that you know to be true. And they say to you, no, you're imagining this. Yeah. You're just, you ask someone a question and they just immediately deny your reality. Mm-hmm. And the other component of gaslighting is also scapegoating, where they would say, my life would be a lot better if you would just be more agreeable. Mm-hmm. That's scapegoating. This project did not go off the ground because you did not follow my vision. Is another classic example of scapegoating. So, and often I discovered this in my research on narcissism, the oldest child is often the one who gets gaslit in a narcissistic family. The oldest child could often be the one who is gaslit. Or they may be viewed as the golden child. In my case, my brother was the golden child who could do no wrong because he was the smartest person on the planet. My sister was the beauty, and I was the crazy artistic dreamer of the family. So I was the family member who was scapegoated and then gaslit as well. Whereas the others, my brother and sister, grew up to be extreme narcissists because they were told they were special. They were told that they were the most elevated thing, special beyond to the point where they were better than other people. They were the family jewels, and I was this creative loser dreamer who just kind of did her own thing. And because I didn't fit their norm and I didn't fit a certain box, I ended up as the one who was kind of getting the brunt of that. So you will find yourself, you're the one getting the brunt of everything while everyone else is going along. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It means that, you just take a look at what's actually, going on here. And you may realize that and once I realized what gaslighting and scapegoating was, all of a sudden it was like, okay, I can now depersonalize this. I'm not saying I like this, but I can definitely depersonalize it.
Mm.
What can I ask what you mean by depersonalizing it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
Take it.
Depersonalizing means I'm not responsible. Like they would say to me, I would feel horrible. Like someone would say to me, I remember I had a professional relationship with a mindfulness therapist who was a trauma informed that basically imploded when I realized he was an extreme malignant narcissist, might even have sociopathic tendencies even. And he would say stuff like, I'm very disappointed that you didn't give me what you wanted. When he failed to articulate for me what he wanted, we were designing his website. And this is a good example. And I was like, you didn't tell me what you wanted. I took a guess at what I thought you wanted. I am disappointed you couldn't read my mind. And I would feel guilty. Like, oh my gosh, you're right.
I'm not good enough. Yeah.
Figure all this out. What's wrong with me? I can't, this is not working for me. This is, well, my gosh. Then I realized, no, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
That's the realization. No, this person is wrong. You are not wrong.
Can you gaslight yourself?
I would say that you can, it's more like self-pity for yourself, or you can, but I don't, gaslighting is more of an action that I view it as someone else does to you. What you would feel about yourself is basically, in the book Rethinking Narcissism, Craig Malik did this very interesting piece where he basically puts narcissism on a spectrum. At the lowest end is Echo, in the myth of Echo and Narcissus. Whereas Echo could only repeat what she heard from Narcissus. She saw a Narcissus could completely ignored Echo. And then Narcissus fell in love with his image when he saw it in the water. He felt so loved that he went to pursue it. He fell in the water and drowned. Then Echo now no longer had anybody that she could echo off of, and she vanished away as well. So I would say more than gaslighting, people that are subjected to this more likely to become an echo, where they don't have an identity of themselves. They have no healthy sense of themselves. So that's what's more likely to happen. I think, that's the dynamic that I've observed in my own life. It's just developing enough self-esteem. And there's this thing they call it, and maybe it's not the right word, but think of healthy narcissism. It's the ability to dare to dream without becoming so self-absorbed that you think the world revolves around you. And I would say that a lot of followers of narcissists, we are echoes. Narcissists need echoes to survive.
And so when someone, you say something and maybe it's a concern you have, or it's a point you want to make about someone else's ministry or something you think that might help them, and they gaslight you by saying, oh, I'm not a good leader, huh? Or they say, and it's just stuff to kind of chip away at your credibility. Sometimes I've found that pastors, when you confront them, will just laugh. They'll just go, Carl thinks I'm messing up here, I guess, and it's kind of that tone, maybe even sometimes.
Well, a lot of it, you don't have the education that I have. You don't have the experience that I have. It's some of that would be more along the lines of scapegoating, which is, the fact that, this would have worked out better if you would have done this differently. The way I look at gaslighting is basically, one way you can tell you're being gaslit is all of a sudden you feel the need to prove everything. I need to document everything that is being said so I can justify myself. I find myself writing lengthy text or lengthy emails or just trying to explain myself completely. If I'm over explaining myself, the question is, why are you doing that? Odds are someone is probably gaslighting. And once you notice it, once you're aware that you're being gaslit, it's like, no. I mean, it could be something as simple as someone lying to you about, where were you at this, were you at this conference? And they say, no, I wasn't, but they were there. That's something as simple as gaslighting, somebody not acknowledging, they were, and you find this a lot, obviously, in cases involving, trauma and abuse. It's, we were just having a pastoral session. There was nothing going on. You didn't see anything. I was just comforting her. You are misinterpreting this. You are misleading. That's where you really get into, or she's just my spiritual wife. I have a legal wife. I don't have, you know, I mean, there's so many
just a random example. Yeah.
So I tend to view gaslighting as you're distorting the reality. You're presenting someone with a false version of reality, and scapegoating is in the biblical sense is the person on which the people put the blame on. You know, so in a church, and I always ask people, one thing you look for is when you all of a sudden notice that one volunteer, especially with somebody a volunteer or staff member who did a lot of work, all of a sudden you start to hear things about them. Question what's going on. This person probably is being scapegoated. Now, there is a possibility there could be a genuine scandal, a general concern, but there are, to me, legitimate ways to go about handling conflict. And spreading rumor mongering is not a very effective way at all. It's a very destructive way to try to resolve any kind of conflict within a church setting.
I've noticed when we've been talking that you've alluded to some people without saying who they are. And I'm not going to pressure you or anything. I know you say what you want when you want to say it. But in the book, do you talk about specific people and specific examples where you've seen this?
What I decided for most of the book, except I did a case study at the end of spiritual narcissism where I decided to unpack the saga of Mark Driscoll, because it was a saga I had been following that for over 20 years. And I wanted to point out how with Young Leadership Network, once I began to meet certain people, I found that within the Young Leadership Network, it's split into Mark Driscoll on one hand and the Emergent Church on the other, that this was an example where narcissism infested both one of the most conservative churches and some of the most liberal churches, and they all shared in common a proclivity towards abuse. And I think that is, one of I mentioned those names. I chose not to name a lot of names throughout the book for the simple reason, one, there's an issue of liability. It's also the ethics of giving someone a medical diagnosis that has not been given. I mean, narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis, and most people don't fit the definition because one of the criteria to be considered a clinical narcissist is that it impacts your daily living. And for a lot of spiritual narcissists, the fact that they don't care about other people and they can put their own needs ahead means they often advance in their careers better than people that have a compassion and have a guilt feeling. They will take on jobs that sound dodgy. They will take on jobs with perks. They will demand perks that most of us would go, we're not going to ask for this absolutely ridiculous housing allowance. We're not going to go for that. They'll do it. So a lot of people that display signs of extreme spiritual narcissism don't fit the clinical definition. So I'm very careful not to diagnose, but also I want people to understand the pattern, not the person. Because if I sit there and say to you, for example, you might be a really big fan of Joel Osteen. You might think he's his work inspired you somehow. Try not to say this in your face, but for example, there are people who have said I was saved by Joel Osteen. So if I start to critique Joel Osteen's approach to ministry, people immediately are going to go defensive. This happens all the time over the door. Anytime we would satirize anybody, a few of their devoted fans would come forward and just all of a sudden let us have it. They would let us. But if I just describe a person like Joel Osteen, they're like, yeah, I get it. So I want people to start to pick up the patterns, and maybe then they'll look at their individual leaders. They'll look at who they pick the book up next time and say, do I want to pick up a book from this person who, I'm thinking about it. This person does kind of come off as kind of self-centered or very egotistical. This person doesn't seem to be that interested in what I have to say. This person's platform sounds very plastic. But if I go in immediately and say, so-and-so's a narcissist, stay away. So-and-so's this, stay away. And maybe for you, you don't need to stay away. For different personality types, maybe that person, if you go to, if I go to a certain concert by somebody, maybe I won't be impacted the way somebody else might be. So I don't want to tell people, here are the good people, here are the bad people, because it's different for each person. What I want them to look about is to be in tune with themselves, be in tune with their own sense of self, their own spirituality, and figure out where are the best healthy places for me to go where I can just be. And it'll be different for each person. Because we all have different personality types, we all have different things that we gravitate towards. And, for some people, going to hear a certain, holy hipster isn't going to hurt them. For other people, they've been burned, like we've been burned by a Hillsong experience. I could probably go to a Hillsong concert, for example, and I wouldn't be impacted. I might not be that thrilled with the music, but I wouldn't be impacted the way that somebody who's been suffering religious trauma from a Hillsong type church would feel.
Yeah.
And there are people, I could probably go to certain services like, I've been to some very Catholic services, and I know that a survivor of Catholic abuse could not go to that. But I also go to these settings knowing that maybe this isn't a healthy setting, but I just want to have an enjoyable evening. And the reason I'm saying that is I don't want people to think that, okay, all of a sudden you now have to put on, and a lot of narcissist books do this, you must now put on your blinders. You must now, bad narcissist, good person. It's not that binary. It's a lot of gray in there, and not every, I don't want to tell people, don't listen to that podcast, don't do this, don't do this. That's not going to help anybody grow spiritually. And I've learned from people that I later discovered were narcissists, but they had one good thing they could teach me. And I learned that from them, and then I moved on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I do struggle with, do I really want to support in any way the works of someone who I know has abused others? And once I know they've abused others, I stay away. I kind of don't participate in their work, but I don't want to, but if someone else is still getting something from that, as long as they can, look, enjoy that book. As I said in the book, I was discussing, look, if you want to wear your friendship bracelets, wear your friendship bracelets. Just don't start worshiping Taylor Swift. There's a difference there. And to help people find that place where they can sit there and be is very important.
Yeah. Would you say if you can't question a leader at all that you should still stay there? I know it's kind of a specific question, but
I never want to say yes or no, definitely, because I think you have to look at each individual situation. For example, I'm a single, I don't have children, and I don't have a spouse. But, if someone was being very abusive to a partner of mine, I would want to exit that church setting. But what if you're in a church setting and your kids are really having a great time in the youth group? Do you automatically pull all your kids out from the social contact that they're enjoying? If you have some friends in the church that you like to get together and see with them after coffee hour, do you immediately cut all ties off? I think it's an individual situation. What I would say to people is once you realize you're in a setting that has narcissistic energy, do not think this is your community.
Yeah. And
that's where people get really hurt, is the thing. You can go there. Look, if you're enjoying the sermon, enjoy the sermon. If you find something meaningful with a group of people you enjoy there, go there. But I'm just thinking, if you're having to get yourself into configurations every time you have to go do something and try to plot that and plan that, how am I going to respond? Then maybe this isn't the right setting for you. But it depends. So many different factors are in play. Do I stay? Do I go? And I think if you're very, how close are you to the situation? Are you the one being scapegoated? How do you feel when you exit that? I do this with a lot of my interaction these days. How do I feel? Is this making me a better person? Or is this harming me in some ways?
Yeah.
And I think the more I'm in tune with myself, the better I can answer that question.
Yeah, and the subtitle of your book, you mentioned it before, but it's a satirical guide to save yourself from spiritual narcissist. I agree with that point you're making, that we need to learn more about it, because it was, at least for me, growing up, I was in Baptist churches and so on, and then I was a pastor for 20 years, and while I was in it, I couldn't see it. And I probably needed to take a course or read a book like yours to realize what was happening. All I knew was I liked to hear good speakers. I liked when they carried on and made jokes and all that. And then I liked that people had a purpose, and so I wanted to have a purpose and I wanted to follow people. But there's that Bible verse says, walk circumspectly, right, with your eyes open. And I think your book's going to be helpful to people to say, this is what it looks like, this is what it smells like, and just be aware, especially if you're being harmed or your
And I think
kids are
what's
being.
also important to recognize is that the research into narcissism and religious trauma is where the research was in alcoholism in the 1980s. And this took me years to forgive people. But when my parents, they died in 77, 78, there was nothing out there. They were just now starting to realize that, no, maybe there's something happens to families. But Betty Ford didn't come out as an alcoholic in 1976. And that was when the conversation began to shift. Church 2 came after Me Too. Me Too was in 2008. Church 2 came sometime after that. We're just now starting to recognize that people are traumatized by religion. Mm-hmm. There are still now therapists that do not accept religious trauma as a clinical issue. They think, oh no, you can't be, you're suffering from generalized trauma. They don't understand how trauma from your religion background can impact your life. We're just now starting to have this awareness that, wow, this may be happening. The Body Keeps the Score, the definitive guide on religious trauma, came out in 2016.
Vander Kolk, yeah.
Yeah, and that was around the time that books on narcissism started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
We're just now starting to rethink and remodel. They're now discussing, a lot of these terms, like there's these terms called narcissistic collapse, which is when a narcissist goes ballistic and they don't get what they want. It's not a clinical term, but there's these other terms like that, terms like healthy narcissism, these different phrases. We're just now coming up with what this is. So basically, in fairness to people, we didn't have these tools. When I was reporting for the Wittenberg Door, none of this existed. So I didn't understand when all of a sudden someone went ballistic on me, what that really meant. I just thought they were being a complete, absolute asshole. Because it's like, how could we just had coffee and we were getting along really, really well. And all of a sudden you turn from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. And I didn't understand why that happened. And we now are starting to understand why this happens. And now that we have this knowledge, I believe it's going to, moving forward, definitely inform how we can, approach different people and know when are we in a safe situation? When are we in I would say, a yellow zone for us? Be careful. You can still play here, but be careful. When are we in a red zone? We better run for the hills or something's. We're going to get into some emotional, physical damage here. And then when are we going to be in situations that are healthy, that are safe?
What would you say to a person like me who's low key and a little shy, a little quiet? When I preached, I was fairly vocal, and so on, but who maybe now realizes, and maybe this is an example, just an example, or maybe it's actually how I am, but is kind of, when you kind of realize I have been narcissistic. I have been, have used gaslighting at times, when I felt under pressure. What would you say to those kind of people? How do you start working out of that?
Well, I remember this is a long time ago. There was a period where I realized, this was back when I was still working for God's Politics blog. I realized that even though I didn't have the knowledge of trauma, I realized that some of my responses when I was being cyberbullied by the U.S. Emergent Church, my responses made me appear to be crazy because I was noticing that people were starting to pull away from me. There were rumors circulating that Becky was nuts, she was crazy. And what I realized was going on is that I was being re-traumatized. Now I know that I was being re-traumatized. Back then I didn't know it. So I remember doing like an open letter. I've done this several times. Look, if there's anybody that I have offended, I even say in the book, multiple apologies to anybody that I have offended in my past actions. And that's a sign that you're not a narcissist. A narcissist will never apologize.
Won't change. Yeah.
In fact, that's one of the major problems in having a narcissist seek out treatment. They only do it if it's court ordered or if they're about to lose their marriage, their job. If they're going to lose something that's important to them that affects their self-image, they may go in for counseling. Anything they do is going to be performative. They're not genuinely going to care about you. They're generally not going to be, they can learn how to temper their actions so they don't have lessen their impact. But they're generally not going to be, I mean, the number of people is one of the hardest things to treat, any kind of personality disorder. And narcissism is, because a narcissism doesn't think they have a problem. You know, it's not like depression where someone says, I'm depressed, I want to not be depressed. I know I'm anxious, I need to get treatment for this. They don't think they have treatment. They just think if everyone else behaves, all the problem's going to go away. So if someone feels that they've done something to people they shouldn't have done, I mean, to the extent you can do the AA, you know, go to people individually. And then if you can apologize, you know, in a larger context. I mean, I've done a couple of, open email letters when there was an incident that happened, like with the U.S. Immersion Church cyberbullying. I just did a thing saying, listen, if I was impacting you by my rants, I am sorry. I was operating at this. I'm genuinely sorry. It's what I would call appropriate shame, and to apologize. If I genuine apology, what am I going to do it better? And I've been, taking care that when I get upset, I kind of step back. I try not to lash at people, and if I did lash, I'll send them an apology. And some people will accept the apology, some people won't. Sometimes you might have unintentionally wounded someone to where the friendship isn't going to be repaired. It might not be repaired. That is an unfortunate part of life. But if you've done the best you can by saying, I am genuinely, truly sorry, is there anything I can do to, we can talk about this, then you've done what you can do on your end. I mean, that's fairly biblical if you look at the way they discuss how to forgive people. And for me, forgiving is not forgetting, and it took a lot for me to forgive my family for what they did to me. But now I take Thich Nhat Hanh's issue on impermanence, that I can reflect on the good parts of our past. I can bring that to the past, but I keep it in my head because right now connecting in person with my family would be not advisable. Almost none of them who are alcoholics or narcissists have gotten treatment. I would be re-entering a lion's den, and I know that. So sometimes the forgiveness is just in your mind. I'm going to forgive you. I will, apologize. If anybody wants to have a genuine conversation with me, I'm up for having a genuine conversation, but not putting yourself back in that situation.
Yeah, where you still have control and you still have triggers and so on. And I personally sometimes feel almost I'm trying to heal these things and work through them, and we're talking about trying to do better and so on. And I just feel almost like it's at the biochemical level where that stuff is. The body keeps the score you mentioned before and so on. It's really, really hard work.
Yeah, and that's why I think the second piece is the trauma piece. And I tell people before you try to, part of this book, and in fact, I do this one chapter on this healing from the sacred sexuality circles. And I even did a disclaimer for that chapter. Look, if you're still healing from stuff at any point and this stuff is starting to trigger you, just put it down. Get help for your triggers, because before you can prevent this from happening again, you first need to put on the oxygen mask. Yeah. There's so many emerging therapies that are coming out. If EMDR is the one that worked for me, but there's emotional isometrics, there's brain spotting, there's a lot of different types of therapies that people can try to see what finally releases this from you. I know I had the previous podcast I mentioned how I now microdose. I started microdosing mushrooms, and I used cannabis edibles at night. These two natural substances keep me grounded. I mean, I feel that I'm very calm given the fact that we live in a state of complete, absolute uncertainty. And it's not this monk kind of calmness. It's just I'm able to be more responsive and deal with things without, just snapping and overreacting very quickly.
Respond instead of react. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can, and I think that's important for us because for our own self-well-being is we can respond and what does our body really want versus what do we feel we have to do to protect ourselves?
That's so good. And we say that kind of simply, you want to respond instead of react. I want to get there. but it requires a lot of hard work. Sometimes it's therapy or chemicals that you need or something, just a lot of hard work and a lot of it's not enough just to know like how to classify what's wrong with you.
Mhm.
You got to do some, you got to really do some work. And I hope your book's going to help us in all those areas. And we're happy to have you on the program, and we will invite you back anytime you want to come to talk more about it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure Laura didn't have anything else to say. She's been kind of quiet here tonight.
No, I've been listening, and it just brings to mind something that happened on Friday. Yeah, I'm an educator, and so a lot of times, you know, you're going to get those emails from a parent that kind of set you off. And so just made me think about that. And I don't know where I'm going with it, but obviously I got some work to do. So,
Yeah, and you
And the
teach
one
kids
thing I
get
would,
gaslighted all the time.
the one thing I think there's the beginning to do before the book comes out. I've been posting some interesting reflections from people, like the conversation that you and we had, and other things on my Substack, Gaslighting for God Substack, and it's encouraging people to start having this conversation, because a lot of it is in the 80s. I remember I was so embarrassed to tell anybody that my parents were an alcoholic, and even now I started telling people that my family has alcoholic narcissistic energies and I had to cut myself off for my own health. And people look at you like, you mean like there's something wrong with you? And to normalize, but also not to make it so extreme. This isn't a case, and it's why I say in my book, I recommend, it's very important, I think, to have a therapist, to have a guide to help you with this. I had a guide that gave me suggestions. Like, I had an objective third party. I went over my family's situation with, it was after my sister passed away and no one bothered to tell me. And I said, this has got to be the family at the straw. I just can't go low contact. I have to go no contact, because this is, so I want to talk to a therapist. Am I overreacting? Is there anything I can do to make this, how is this going to go about? And she just said, no, you are correct. This is a situation that cannot be fixed. You are correct in wanting to distance yourself. And for the first time, I felt like distanced myself in a healthy way. I just, when someone said to me, they sent me an email like, aren't you interested in connecting with your family? And I'm like, I'm very interested in connecting with people, but I'm not interested in connecting with anybody who didn't tell me about my sister dying. And I just left it at that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it just felt so good, because I didn't have that anxiety build up. I didn't have that lashing out that feels good in the moment, but then you feel like absolute.
It wasn't revenge. It wasn't revenge or anything
No,
like
it's
that.
just, if you could get that point, you just state your truth. This is what I feel, and walk away. This is it, mic drop. And I think we're looking at people this time wanting to do a lot of that, but it's to get yourself to the point where you can do this. And once you've got the help for your triggers, what I think Gaslighting for God does is it'll help keep you from going back into that same situation. It will teach you the patterns that are not healthy for you. And once you've dealt with your trauma triggers, you're not going to, yes, you may still be attracted to it. There are times that I will confess, I will see an event posted on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, it'd be so much good to go to that little fun group. And I remember all the times we would have, singing around a campfire and doing all these interesting things. And I realized, nah, the blowback after that isn't going to be worth it. It's just, I'm just going to be feeling, I know how I feel when I'm in those spaces. I know how they make me feel, and it's not going to go there again. So acknowledging the FOMO, it's going to feel bad sometimes, but then you're going to find other places that just let you be, and that's where you belong.
Yeah. We're so grateful for you. I've read the book enough to do a review, and I'm looking forward. I'm hoping you send your best friends an autographed copy of
Yeah, my publisher and I are going to be working on, thanking everybody for all the lovely comments they're making and support. It's good to have that kind of support. It's really, very helpful, because in today's commercial world, where everything is like reads like generative AI, it's just exciting to, present something that's, human generated and hopefully gives people some good hope.
Good.
So when the book comes out, where's the best place for people to to purchase the book or your other books that are currently out? And in addition to that, how can people find you?
I'm BeckyGarrison.com is my website. I have Becky Garrison Writer is my Facebook author page.
Okay.
Becky_Garrison is my Instagram account. And Becky Garrison Gaslighting for God Substack. If you just Google Becky Garrison Substack or Gaslighting for God Substack, that'll come up. And also Lake Drive Books is publishing Gaslighting for God and Jesus Died for This. So they're a good resource also for a lot of other books on healing and trauma. They're a good source for that kind of material for people.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Good deal.
I'd also recommend watching that movie that you recommended, because I watched it when I wanted to understand a little bit more. Now that I have your book, but that movie will give them a bit kind of a visual to go along with it. I'm really excited that you're getting this out. Did we say the date?
It's January
27th, 2026 is the release date.
That's coming up quicker than you think it is. It's already Thanksgiving almost.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Well, Becky, thanks for being with us and thanks for spending the time. I always enjoy what you have to say and just kind of take it in. And you share so much. I can just hardly take it all in, but it's all wise and good and kind of sinks in slowly. But I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. For the audience out there, we want to thank you for tuning in. Check out Becky at BeckyGarrison.com. And in the meantime, be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.